Hi, welcome. I'm Ramis, and we had, since last time when we were discussing about Docker, there was some discussion about logging. One of the things I was complaining about in Docker is that it's not solving the logging problem of containers in general. I think this is where somehow the discussion started on the meetup pages. And today we are talking about logging. So to start the day or the evening, I would like to say two sentences. I'm not going to take too long. Two sentences. Logs, logs, my kingdom for some logs. And I just say that to show how much important logs are. I'm sure all of you are already aware of that. It's just a way to highlight it in the, like as an introduction to the evening. I've been a sysadmin for the past 12 years, and even when I used to just maintain a bunch of Windows servers, logs were the most important thing. And no matter what system you used, there's always something missing. Some log that just disappeared, some trace that you cannot find now. The logs have already rotated and you lost the last one that you really needed to see now. All these things makes you really appreciate how logging is important. And the day you get, may it not happen to you, you get hacked and your system is breached. And the only thing you really look for is logs. Just, if not to save face, just to find something about what happened. So it's really, really, really important. I don't need to stress about that. And to leave you off with one last thing, whatever happens in the network, if it's not logged, it didn't happen. So a lot of things can happen without you noticing if you don't have a good logging strategy and architecture there. So that was all I wanted to say before we start today. Now we go with Antti about the logging architecture.
Hi, I'm Antti. I've been probably from the first DevOps meeting that we had, I've attended. I think all of them, at least a single one, because this is really, really fun. And I think I dare to say that this is the biggest one so far. Your math is coming better and better because we're closing it. Okay, that's 50 people, not really there yet. I'm really happy to see you all here. Myself, I have the flu today. That's the perfect day to have the flu when you are giving multiple talks. But I'm heavily medicated and I've got my DevOps power animal with me, so we should be all good. Docker is a nice tool. It doesn't solve the logging problem, but it gets one thing well, and it's the sharing part of the containers. And that's something that other people haven't focused on so much, and you should probably check Docker out if you haven't. But what we were thinking about doing today with Rames was that we have a tri-sider. We don't hold all of the information in the world, so we have got this kind of a small tool which is now populated with a couple of these logging related software. And this is something that you can also add new software in, and you can go and put minuses and pluses and even vote for those tools that you personally use and like and would like to recommend to other people, so that we could gather a small information database about what we actually use here and what is good and bad about those tools. The link can be found through the meetups page. I just commented it there. Does someone want Rames to write it down over there while I speak? Hands up. No. Okay. Then we will. Anyway, if you have time, You can write your ideas and pluses and minuses on a pen and paper, and we will input it into the system if using systems is too hard for DevOps people. But sometimes is. But you can also like use your 3G and do it online. But ready to the first talk that I would like lead you in with, which handles requirements. And I wanted to talk about requirements because last time when we had the Docker meetup and we talked a bit about logging, it seemed like the discussion was slightly one-sided or narrow compared to what I saw as being inside the realm of things that you can and maybe should log and what the logs are actually useful for. So my talk has two sections. One is what are logs used for, and the second one is about the requirements for these different purposes that logs can be used for. If you have any questions or if you want to add something to any of these slides, if I miss something, if I misspeak anything, just holler. This isn't such a big group yet, so we can still keep it pretty informal. So just hand up. I will try to notice you. If I don't notice you, just shout. All the other meetups have been pretty informal, and I personally like that. So hopefully this isn't the first one that isn't informal. So let's start with what the logs are used for, and to pave the way and ease the way for everyone who's going to be speaking today. Later on, I wanted to lowball it and start with a cat picture. So one of the things that Ram has also touched on that logs can be used for is just diagnosing all kinds of problems, whether it be just system errors or hackers getting into your system or whatever. If you have any good examples of when you have used logging to diagnose problems, that would be a good idea to share them, or a good spot to share them. Nobody. If you manage to gather the courage to speak at some point, feel free to do so. I think all of us have done this in many ways, so I won't be delving further into it, and I will be just glossing over everything. I'm just going to keep this as an overview because we do have a time limit, because I want to go to the song too. The second thing that popped into my mind when I thought about this is analyzing how the users actually behave in your systems, and this is a good example of somebody using a sports tracker or something like that to paint a hydra or something. So this kind of stuff probably would help you a lot if you are trying to analyze what your users are using your software for. The new version of Paint. But that's also what we do a lot at meetings. What we do is we make a space in the internet for your meetings so that you can share your materials and contact information. It's a really simple tool. We integrate a couple of live conferencing tools like Skype or Link or stuff like that, and we try to make it easier, the whole process of using technological tools in meetings. And what we try to do while doing that is looking at how the users actually behave in the system and where they crash into a corner. And one of the actually, it's not really logging, but one tool that we use is usertesting.com. It's a tool or website where you can go and put your SaaS project, and then other people, like general working people, they will come and use your tool. They will record everything that they do and talk over what they are thinking and why they get stuck, because they will get stuck, and you will be amazed on how well ingenious the people are on finding ways to interpret your fancy interface that you think is really, really clear and simple and nobody can get it wrong. You should use it if you are have anything to do with user interface design. But that's one kind of a log, but we also then of course use access logs and things like this and log the user paths on what kind of buttons they click. That gives us a lot of information which all comes from logs. Then of course performance optimization. What we do is on all the API calls that come through our system, we generate a unique hash for that request, and all the background workers that do stuff to generate the output for the API call also log that same hash. So when we find that some API call takes a long time, we can just go and look at the worker logs and see which of the workers was slow and bogged down the system. There's probably other ways of using the logs for optimization. Usually the basic Apache logs or MySQL logs, they just tell you how long something took, and you can grep for things that took too long. Then resource planning. If you don't know how much your system is used or where the bottlenecks are, if you have the budget to buy a whole rack of servers to host your website, by all means do that, but most businesses don't, and they need to balance between how much they invest in actual hardware and systems, and balancing that.
Well, since this is formal, I can then ask a question.
Yeah.
Don't you think you're mixing a little bit between logging and monitoring? They're quite lively.
That's actually a really, really good question. I've been thinking about that a lot in the recent days when I've been writing this talk, and it's been really, really fuzzy, like distinction where the logging ends and where monitoring or like system administration alerting starts. And this is like, I wanted to start about the ways that those logs ultimately help the businesses, and ultimately they usually help the businesses by providing some kind of alerts or providing some kind of tools that can be used to browse the logs or get information out of the logs. And I think that, for example, monitoring tools are a kind of an interface to read the logs that are underneath. But that is a really good question, and I don't have a good answer on where to like draw the lines between these things. This is one of the great examples of that also. You see these counters, we have 99.99% uptime, and how do they actually count that? I have no clue, but probably there's something pinging and recording a log and then estimating on how much it was down, if it was down. Then some people might think that this is just, you just put the data into the database and you do a database query and that gives you the billing information. But basically all of that is also something that I thought that very well might be stored in logs. And what are the database tables if not logs of stuff, if it's a transaction log that tells you that they did this and this and this and we want to build up for that. Am I doing on time? Well. Okay, and then data preservation. This is also one of those gray areas, but for example, MySQL and also Postgres have a binary log that can be used to build the whole database again if you want. You probably usually don't want to, but for example, replication works by using those logs to replicate the databases. Once again, a gray area. If you need to do audits, like security audits or test things periodically and report to your superiors that yes, we actually tested that this stuff we deployed really works. Logs may be a good idea to store to prove that, and many I've heard that many, like when you are in a big organization and you have legal requirements to do audits, you have to store those logs for those audits for a long time. I don't know if anybody here is working with anything like that. You could enlighten me. Yeah.
I was, sorry, go ahead.
I am. On the other hand, when it comes to security audits, the logs can also be pain in the ass because they also might be, producing information that is not necessary to have, because that alone is a problem in the security audit. And secondly, sometimes, unfortunately, it is the case that we don't want to leave a trace of what we have been doing. So I know that this is like this is an unofficial opinion and does not represent anything that my employer does.
Yeah, I know where she works. So. Yeah, I understand.
As a joke of Friday, if you like.
Yeah. And others, if you have any ideas.
Just for you to also know that we have a recording.
But we didn't tell much. So any ideas on how have you used logs or how have you seen logs being used?
I guess my example is nothing new in the sense that the logs are being used to for many of those things that you described. My point of view to those logs probably was that I have noticed recently that sometimes when we are doing software development, where the software developers decide what kind of things their software logs in the first place. And those decisions are very often made based on software development needs, not like operational needs. So the software might produce a lot of information, but it has absolutely no use whatsoever when the software is being run in production. So it would be really great to have views on how you see if logging is actually a feature of a product.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I'm in the intersection that I also use logs that me and my team generate to analyze the business and try to fix the performance bottleneck and try to understand how the users use it. And that means that we really have to concentrate a lot on what we log and how we log and how we filter all of that stuff that we put out. We try to log as much as we can, but we still constantly run into situations where we haven't logged enough and we have to add that. And I don't think there's a really like a silver bullet for this, but I think DevOps is a good way to look at it, so that if you have the same people or the same teams doing the development and doing the maintaining, maybe when it's running in production, the guys that are maintaining it also get a piece of that information from the upper levels of the organization on what they would actually want to see, and that can be more easily conveyed to the developers if they are the same people. So I don't know in organization who do they call if something is not logged. Is it the sysadmins or is it the developers that they call, or do they even understand that?
Yeah, maybe one comment on that is that you said it didn't happen if it wasn't logged, but if nobody read the log, it doesn't matter if it happened. And one thing I found quite useful, especially once the organization gets a little bit larger than just one row of people, is that you expose the logs to as wide audience as possible, because that raises the limit a little bit, and also we will catch many kind of, I would call them errors, but mistakes in logging and so forth. So usually you get a little bit resistant first, but after a while it may actually work out quite well. So you don't log things you don't want people to see, and you log enough information and so forth. And if you don't, there's a high risk that you're going to get caught.
Yeah. Actually, there was one meetup that I didn't get to go to because it was in Tampere. Nico is here. Thank you for hosting it. I think Erno talked something about like the spirit of DevOps or something like that in the meetup. And did he like focus on this aspect at all, like how the communication is important? I think that transparency of the logs is one of the ways of the communication that you can have in your organization. Did he touch on any of that communication side?
Yeah, definitely. But Elno's point was basically that you don't want to have a separate sysadmin team and separate development team. So basically, if you think that there's a problem that software developers aren't making the logging features that you need, maybe you should think about improving the communication, because in our company, logging features are planned together with the developers. And well, sometimes we also do the development ourselves and operate the systems, but it's different people that run the system and different people that develop the system. The planning of running the system is done together. So it doesn't go like our development team does the software for 3 years or so and then just throw it to the ops guys, and ops guys are cursing around about the software argument. So I think that in the end it's always a communication problem and not just about logging.
Question. There was this very good point of very fine line between logging and monitoring. Security is a great example here, because very often the services and software should be able to produce stream of security-related events to some remote security center that is run by, let's say, your customer. And thinking of that, using of APIs in between here, between the software producing the information and the monitoring system, if you want to call it that way, sort of makes sense. So are you using APIs by any chance, and what sort of things you do with those?
No, we doesn't use APIs. We actually do a lot of stuff for the government. So audit trails and keeping of the logs and doing custom security logs is familiar to me. But in the end, basically all the time we will just make plain files. So plain file logging, and then if the customer needs the logs, they are given to the customer, and we personally guarantee them that we are monitoring them. And if there's exceptions or something that doesn't something that looks funny, we react to those things. So it would be awesome if there was a product that could be centralized, used with multiple softwares. But with our cases, it's always so custom that the centralized system would be, basically a shell of modules or something like that. So.
Nice.
Okay, I think we could advance to the next portion, which is these requirements, and maybe continue on these topics while going through this. I'm out of funny pictures. Sorry, there's too much that I had to actually write on the slides. So one of the questions or the requirements that I wanted to highlight was how verbose should the logs be, or how much should you log? Basically, I don't think storage costs nowadays accounts too much. Maybe if you use SaaS providers that bill you by some ridiculous measure, then you might have a problem of paying too much for having your logs be too verbose or logging too much. But
in embedded systems.
Yeah. Well, you shouldn't log on this.
Yeah.
You should log on it. In logging is not something you keep in your system. You keep it in the logging place. And this is like and so what happens with logging is you produce log. As I said, someone was saying it's a stream of log going. So the stream of log should be. You should always keep what you need now, which is quite small, like immediate needs, and then everything else you send somewhere else. There's somewhere else, could be disk, could be memory, somewhere else could be a system that's like database, whatever. But you don't keep the if your requirements are let's keep 1 year of logs because of some audit or of some requirements we have. There's no way you can keep a year of logs, even if you're using your own hardware. That doesn't make sense to keep on your server. You have to ship it somewhere else.
But I would want to highlight that maybe some embedded systems are not all the time online, and they have to cache or store their logs for a while before they can send them forward, and the storage space for them might be really limited. So that might be one reason too. Very good point. Then there's the gathering cost. You could log the whole database state for each query, but it would probably be quite costly. It would give a good idea of what the system state was when the query was made, but you have to balance it somehow. And the last point I wrote was the use case unknowns, and that's a good question. What should you log, because you don't know what you will need the next week or next year when the system is deployed. So I don't think nothing else than experience and lots of more experience and sharing the experience will teach us to know what we should log and when we should log. But if you are not in the embedded systems, I would probably go with as much logging as possible so that you can debug the system better and process it. The third point, ease of processing. The more you have information, the easier it probably is to visualize it better so that you can actually give all the related information in your visualizations if it's not directly linked to the actual log event that you have stored. For example, it would be really nice if you are storing a user action, user clicked button B, and the user's email was this and this. You could get a lot of transparency on how your individual users would use that system. But then again, if you want to ship your logs into a SaaS provider outside the EU, you should probably not store your user emails in your logs, because EU privacy laws usually prohibit you from doing stuff like that.
A comment on that particular subject matter. I mentioned before that it seems to me that the logging in software is done based on software development. It might also be that the developers don't actually do a data analysis when they develop the software. I mean, do the feature grooming and that sort of stuff, which in turn seems to lead to a situation where data that should not end up in the logs in the first place end up there, because there is no planning for the logs either. So it's an accident rather than something done willfully. And then, of course, when the EU privacy laws or data protection legislation come into play, then it's sometimes really tricky to move data around and erase data that should not be there. It can be a gruesome amount of work.
Yeah. We also do work with a couple of EU operators who have strict requirements for this stuff. And it's not always fun when you can't use the most hip and new SaaS software, because you can't send your data there. Sorry.
Could you name more examples of privacy laws? So I heard not storing, not sending emails, is it like a law says it, or just already here? So more examples about privacy laws.
So basically the biggest hurdle, I think, is the personal information privacy law that mandates that if you ship the any personal information outside the EU boundaries, or I'm not sure what the act actually is, but if you ship it outside, the person or the instance who takes the data and stores that data has to provide you a certain set of standards which they guarantee you that they fulfill, or otherwise you will be held liable for any possible problems that arise from that.
The problem mainly happens when you ship any personal customer information, like their email, their SSN, or any really sensitive information about your customers. Let's say you use Amazon and you use the US availability zones. That's a problem if you are working under the EU privacy laws, because then in the US they have this law that the government can see whatever data your data center has without your permission, because they have this Patriot Act or whatever. So you cannot ship such information outside of you. But not every company in Finland really has to fall under that, as far as I understand. I was working for Hovi, which they are doing banking, and then this was really strict. We couldn't ship anything outside of EU. So basically, we were only possible to run our services in the Ireland center of AWS, and we could not use other services like mixed panel or any user analysis stuff. Barely we could use Google Analytics, and that's because of the privacy law. Because we have to send some information about our customer. Just sending a list of names in your customer for a bank is good.
Was it kind of concerned like explicit information or implicit information? So if you, for example, store user IDs to logs, and in that way you can map the user IDs in a separate system that you would use in some other place.
The problem is if more information than that goes somewhere else, then people can link it. So at least in our case, we tried not to do anything because then you never know what the audit would happen.
Yeah.
So it's
But the
really
user IDs, they can end up being personal information. That sort of analysis probably should be done by case by case. So you should understand what kind of information you are dealing with, and the point that you made about combining different data sources. That is something that the legislation specifically says something about, actually. So this is an interesting topic, and I warmly recommend trying to understand what law thinks is personal data or sensitive personal data, for that matter, and what is the sort of interpretation of how a number of your shoe can become a piece of information based on which you can be identified as an individual.
The best guide that I can give you on this is if you are working on somewhere which is maybe in the boundaries of this legislation, talk to your boss and tell them that you need legal counsel.
But it's very easy to fall down into one part. The file path, for instance, can contain a lot of personal data. If you have like any OS, you have a folder with my docs or whatever, and you might have your name in there. That's personal data. And the file path sounds like quite innocent for most software engineering. So if you don't give the file path or any of stuff, then you might get the entire lot of data in there.
That's of course like if you are dealing with like end user systems, where the end user has something to say about some of the stuff that you might be logging into, like even if it was coming from the end user system. The developers and those who kind of run and operate the system, they are in a bad place because of bad decisions made by the consumer somewhere. So that's not in any way a very easy situation.
I personally haven't heard of a lot of big legal cases that would have revolved around this. If somebody knows them, please link them, but I think we should go on further. I have a couple of slides and I think our schedule time is already gone. Let's just keep talking because this discussion I think is really valuable. So one aspect is then how long should you archive the logs? Rob has also already told you that you should probably have only a small portion of it like in the hotbed and push the others into an archive system. Push it somewhere. Nowadays, if you can just push stuff into S3, you have a lots and lots of space to put your archive. So I'm not really sure why would anyone purposefully throw away data that they can use someday because of storage costs. But then there's value decay. At some point, your developer logs, they just don't provide value to anyone. Some data just isn't important anymore, so you can just scrap it. And there's also legal requirements for this stuff. Sometimes there's a law that says that you have to keep this log for 10 years and then you have to keep it for 10 years. Or at least try your best.
Hopefully you're still in business.
But
hopefully you're still in business.
Yeah.
There's also an opposite case of that, so law says that you cannot keep it longer than 6 months
yes.
or one year, and that may come a little bit problematic if you don't know what's going on.
Very true, and then there is this very grey area where it's not about law, but actually an agreement that has been made with a customer that has his or her reasons for mandating something like that. A question, how many of you guys are developers or operate systems? Excellent. How many customer agreements come into your table so that you can actually determine what sort of requirements the customer has for how long he should be keeping logs.
Quite a lot. Yeah. But sometimes I don't think that this really. Sometimes it's just logs and you put those and it doesn't contain any information worth of anything to anyone else that you are trying to debug something that's wrong. So, but yeah, it might be that there's some sensitive information or you are bound by some laws. If you are into it, but if you aren't, be happy. It makes life a lot easier if you don't have to think about legal requirements. Okay, then, is it okay to accidentally lose entries? No. Okay. Accidents actually do happen, and like safeguarding costs might be really, really high if you have really, really high needs to make sure that every log stays where it is and is archived. There might be some legal requirements also here. If you are storing like payment data, you probably have you are bound to store that data for quite a long time. Then there's really not that important logs that can just, nobody cares if your server goes down for 2 days and it doesn't log anything and you just bring it up. And then there's some cases where it's really, really important. You have to like stop the whole system if the logs aren't right. And system complexity, at least in the era of the cloud, when you don't just use one system that writes to its file system and believe that everything is okay. When you have to manage logs from various systems all around the web and you have to aggregate them together, it really sometimes adds a lot to the safeguarding costs and maybe the possibility of not losing anything. And I think this is my last slide. Yes. This might be a tiny thing, but I myself think wrestling with this.
What do you mean by not working?
For example, if you have a binary log with MySQL, if you switch to transactions, they might end up in a state of the system. And when you are
Use Postgres.
I have never ever had that happen, but that was a simple example. One thing that I'm personally been wrangling with is that I have many computers all around that like do the same stuff, and they serve the same role, and they give different kinds of logs. And when is it meaningful to know which one did it first, and when isn't it meaningful to know which one did it first? How frequently do I have to run the diagram that checks that the clocks are really, really close to each other, and when can it reflect 2 seconds? Because at least when using Zen virtualization, I think we have had a lot of problems with our clock scripting part, and then if you need to have some second or nanosecond timestamps with your stuff, they might get out of order. For many situations, this probably isn't an issue, but for some systems it might be an issue. I've heard rumors of things like vector blocks, which I don't understand, but probably deal with something like this in distributed systems. But I don't know if anybody here can tell us what are vector blocks are. Easy subject with 3 words.
Could you explain, but I don't think it's worth it.
Yeah, probably not worth it. But can you like tell us that it actually is something that you would apply in this kind of situation?
Well, it's distributed systems. Of course, you can find out the order, but necessarily depends also on transmission delays. Because other one is really close and other one is farther away that might already be still opening up again. There's many variables.
Okay. I didn't
It's
get
not
it,
simple.
but yeah, it's not simple. Let's all just read up on vector class when we go. Okay, I think that's my presentation, my first presentation. I like today. But I think it's time for a break. Or is it?
Well, it's 10 to 7, so we could have kind of 10 to 15 minutes more if there's some.
What does our schedule say? Yeah. I'm ahead of schedule. Great.
Well, we could, if you don't have any other ideas, I mean, we can go into this here and try to push in some, at least, ideas, and then people could, during the break, write pluses or minuses on sticky notes and put them here so we can collect.
Yeah, there's not a lot of action happening here. I don't know why. But if you have any ideas, or if you want to, for example, write down the systems that you yourself use for logging, just on a paper, I can type them into the computer, so that we can get a view on what people are using and what they are not using during the break. So you can get some more bread and coffee, and while you're doing that.
So what we have here is we have rsyslog, logstash, papertrail, logly, fluentd, syslog-ng, if somebody uses that. And these are the ideas that me and Antti came up with. So these are try to mix log, single system logging or distributed logging, log processing, SAS logging, any other ideas?
Splunk.
Hands and Splunk. Hey, nobody uses that. That's too expensive.
No, it's not.
I'll tell you how to replace that.
No, thanks. I don't want to register.
Okay.
That's how easy it
Splunk.
was.
Splunk.
There's the storage cost is the cost of processing.
I'll show you something better.
This is how you write it.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
The big expensive enterprise tool. Okay,
Okay.
other ideas?
So somebody used it, so I will give it a vote.
Just a question, why you added the tool background? It's only for JavaScript exceptions. It's not like for...
It's part of logging. It improves logging somehow. So I know that there are tools for Python, there are tools for Ruby. You can also include those because it's not about collecting list of tools. It's more about whatever tools are related to logging and give an idea. So if I'm thinking about Kubak, then I can go here and see, okay, these are the pluses, these are the minuses, so I can decide if I want to use that for something else.
What about platform like New Relic?
Yeah, really.
What?
New Relic.
Is New Relic logging or
Yeah,
more
it
about
does a lot of-
analysis?
Yeah,
rather
but
than-
is it
That's
you
a lot
use
of part of
you
that
first have to log before you can analyze?
Yeah, but does it provide you with log storage or
With money.
of course?
Okay, hand up who actually uses New Relic in production. Wow, you are really rich.
Well, then one day or for free. You don't pick up the hand, you get cheaper.
Okay, cool. I'll add New Relic also.
Yeah. What other tools? But use anything else?
I'm sure if I can add many votes. Nico actually used New Relic. No, you have to do it yourself. I'm
For the
sorry.
votes, you have to do it yourself, but for the plus and minus, we can add everything we want.
Yeah,
I think this is the
sure.
most important also.
I can add. I don't know if you know about
Nice,
Quite
important.
I don't know if we had like a couple of hardware servers, I could justify this price. But we are running like 70 virtual servers, and they don't have any pricing that would like tell you, well, I have this tiny server that does this tiny thing, and it's full price.
Actually, the light version or free version or whatever it's called, it's you know, you don't have to pay for that. So the options that are pricey are the application monitoring and stuff like that.
Okay,
So,
can you upgrade only one of your 70 machines to the beta?
I actually don't know, since we also think that New Relic is too expensive, and one of our big customers use New Relic with Windows because there's not really anything better for that, and they pay for it. But looking more into it, and a marketing guy from New Relic actually called me a couple of weeks ago. He told me that, okay, so you have this amount of servers, but you don't have to, you know, pay for all of them. Just install the light version. And actually, the Fonecta guy, so from Go4 and Reactory and whatever, and they used it like this. So they used New Relic on a couple of the application servers, on a couple of the front-end servers, and then they just assumed that if you can monitor the application on one node, it probably is doing the same thing on all of the nodes. So that was the
Yeah, you are talking to a bunch of sysadmins who have been there and seen that, well, these systems are quite the same.
Is anyone using something like Kafka?
No.
Apparently nobody knows what.
Yeah,
You can tell us.
Probably gives me yeah. I'm not using heavy stuff like that.
Apache Kafka.
Well, it's big data anyway, so.
So, what?
But is this the Apache
Yeah,
Kafka?
Apache Kafka. Yeah.
Okay. So this is
Is anyone using it? No. Okay. So.
I think one of my friends is probably using it. Well, like he's doing some larger projects.
but for logging, like actually collecting logs.
I don't remember.
I think you use it to ship the logs. It's
Okay.
a reliable message.
You can basically keep them for a short time. That is the idea. To keep the stuff there for a short time and then use it somewhere else, like laser or cheap storage type of thing.
I think there's multiple of these kind of message queue solutions.
Yeah, but I wouldn't describe it as logging systems.
No.
Message queuing is just something in the middle.
Well, locally use Kafka. Locally use Kafka.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say this is a
I know,
tool.
that's what
Yeah.
it's a messaging system. Locally is using.
I use Redis as a queue. It's works.
Go and vote. Vote, damn it. Actually, this doesn't update in real time.
Okay, so I think it's time for a break now. And guys, if you want to use a computer and go and add plus and minus or whatever you want to put there, do. If you don't want to use a computer, it's time for a break. Put something. There's sticky notes here and pens. Put something on a sticky note about the topic with the idea and plus or minus, and stick it here, and we'll go over it later on today.
If you don't have a computer and want to add a vote, come and talk to me. I will personally hack this system by clearing my keys.
Rather prosy.
Yeah. Very good idea.
But I think they love the idea.